Hey everybody, this is John Wood and I'm coming to you once again from East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in beautiful Billings, Montana. In this video, I am going to tie for you a staple pattern that should be in everybody's box if you're fishing in the Rocky Mountain West. And it is Gary LaFontaine's Emergent Sparkle Pupa. This is a surface caddis fly that imitates the emerging adult, and it's a spectacular fly that's based on years and years of underwater research and observation by Gary LaFontaine and his team. And it's listed in several of his books: Caddis Flies, obviously, Trout Flies, Proven Patterns, and also in the dry fly, New Angles. But if you're going to fish caddis hatches and you're fishing a caddis hatch and you can't get them to take a surface fly like the standard elk hair caddis, it's probably because they're keyed in on the emergers. This fly right here is the ticket. It will do it for you. So this one I'm going to tie for you today, I'm going to tie it on a size 16 Timeco 100 hook, just your standard dry fly hook. Any standard dry fly hook will do for this fly. The shuck on this and the bubble is a burnt orange antron yarn. You can see it's a pretty bright color. The body is a combination, and it's mixed of bright green, insect green antron and insect green hair dubbing. The wing we're going to use, I like this dark spinning hair. Now you can see it didn't really flare because I'm right out towards the ends when we tie this in, and it's going to give me just enough flare but not too much. And then the head on this fly, which creates that forward shroud, I have cut off hair from a hare's mask. And the reason I like to do this is because it lets me control the color. As you can see, the edges are really light and the center is really, really dark. And by using the dark and the light, and then around the back, some of this red that you can see right here, you're able to get a really, really mottled color out of that. So let's get started. Let's see if we can tie one up. Okay, so let's tie Gary LaFontaine's Sparkle Emergent Pupa. This is a caddis emerger pattern. This works really, really well in situations where there are caddis on the water, but you can't get the trout to take a dry. I'm going to start by putting my thread on there. I'm going to come back and be just a little bit short of the start of the hook band. And what I've done is I pulled off a length of the burnt orange antron and tied a knot right in the middle. I double that over and trim the ends so that they're nice and even. And then I'm going to start by bringing my thread back forward about halfway and catch one half on the back side of the hook, and then catch the other half. Let me re-even that real quickly on my side of the hook. Ooh, and catch it in my material clip there. Now what this is going to allow me to do is create that shroud that goes all the way around the body of this fly. Now I'm going to take my thread back to the start of the bend of the hook. Now there's a couple ways you can tie this. Some people like to tie off the shuck first and then do the bubble around the fly. I like to come back later and I'll show you. We're going to pick that trailing shuck out. Now that I've got my shuck in place, I'm going to come up here, add a little dubbing wax to my thread, and I don't need a ton. I don't need a long surface covered with it. Now this is the two dubbings that I mentioned. They've been blended together, and I've got them in my little makeshift dubbing dispenser. I just find it a lot easier to use. I'm going to pinch it out and just kind of touch it onto the thread, and it's a technique that Gary called touch dubbing. And you just put it on there, and for this portion, for the body, I do like to give it just a little bit of a twist to kind of contain it so it doesn't get so wild. So I've just touched that onto the wax and then lightly created a noodle, but I didn't wrap it real tight. I don't want it completely contained, because inside that bubble you want those fibers nice and loose so that they'll catch air bubbles, which will imitate that mirrored look that these bugs get when they're emerging, when the gas that's created gets trapped inside that shuck that's being shed. Now you can see I'm about a little over 2 eye lengths back from the eye of the hook. And that's where I stopped, and I brought my thread back to the eye because I want a little thread base to really lock this shuck down once I get it in place. Now I'm going to pull it around, pull it snug, and you can grab the two pieces of antron right in front of the eye and kind of pinch it, and then just push that back. And then very lightly loop over that, and I'm using my thumbnail and my fingertip to keep the thread from shifting forward, because I want these wraps just right in front of the underbody on this fly. Now I can just kind of take this with just those two kind of loose wraps and make sure that that antron is distributed. I'm going to turn this up here so I can look at the bottom side. Make sure it's distributed all the way around the hook shank. And I like that nice bubble. That's a really good bubble for this. You can make it too big, and it's much easier to make it too small, because you want it big enough, again, like I said, to catch air once you've treated this with some good floating, to catch air inside the shuck, to help the antron imitate that mirrored sheen that they get when they're emerging. Alright, now I'm going to lock that down really good, and then pull up that antron and clip it as close as I can to the hook shank. Now I want to make sure that I don't have anything up here further than the back of the eye of the hook. So trim those off and then wrap up those butts. Now I've got my underbody and our shuck. Now for the wing, I like a nice dark deer hair, and I'm just going to pull off. This is a fairly fine deer hair. It's not going to flare a whole lot, but it is going to give me a little bit of a flare. Clip that off of you can see how much I've got. Clip that off the skin. Now I'm going to clean this out real quick. And I usually end up clipping a little bit more than I'm going to need. That allows me to look at what I've got and then decide exactly how much I want. And I know this just from tying so many of them. You just get to where you can feel it. Now I'm going to take this, put it in my handy dandy stacker. Get it all stacked up. I'm using this loon stacker. I really like it because it's got that window in the front, and you can look down in there and see if your tips are even. And when you get everything evened up, you just flip it up and you've got a really nice long length that you can grip. Now whoop, you know what? I got ahead of myself because I didn't pick out the shuck. Let's do that before I get that on there. Alright, now I've got my bodkin. I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to pick these fibers from the top because we don't really need them up on the top of that. It's going to be covered up. And I don't want a whole lot. I've got like 8 or 10 fibers there. And that's it. And that's going to be enough to catch a whole lot of light and imitate the shuck on that fly. And by picking it out, I've already set my length when I cut it. So the length that I pick out, I already know what length it's going to be once I pick it out. Alright, back to the wing. We'll restack this, which is never as easy the second time. Get that. Alright. Now, the tips, I want them to be just a hair longer than the bend of the hook. So I've got that set right back there. Now I'm going to take that, transfer it to my left hand and pinch that down real tight. And then make a loose wrap, and then as I come back around, apply the pressure by pulling up. And what that does is it keeps you from pulling the hair around the hook. If you start and apply pressure as you go around on the first wrap, it's just automatically the tension of the thread is going to try to roll that hair onto the other side of the hook. But by pulling upward, the tension is even all the way around and it just sucks it down in place. Now once I get it locked down with 2 or 3 wraps, I'm just going to come through it, right through the hair, and make those wraps, and that locks it down even more. And your wing is right up on top. Now normally I wouldn't let go of that wing until I've trimmed it, but I wanted you to see what was going on. So brush that out of the way. Clip that off. Get it out of the way of the eye of the hook. Unlike the elk hair caddis, we're not building a big head with the deer hair. We're going to build our head with a little dubbing here in a minute. And it's going to also add to the illusion of the emerging shuck. I've got that in place. Now I'm going to come back a little bit. And I'm going to tell you that I've got that tied just a little forward a little more than I actually like it. But we're going to use the head to kind of camouflage that. And you can see it's kind of buggy. I've got some of the underbody sticking out through the shuck. And that's good because that'll imitate legs, and it's just another trigger on the fly. Now for the head, I'm going to use the touch dub technique again, where you just put a little wax on your thread. And then I've got my hare's mask that I've trimmed and put in this little empty firehole hook box. And I'm going to pull those fibers out, and I just want a little bit, not too much, at a time. There we go. And I'm just going to lay them flat over that. I'm not going to spin them at all. Just lay it onto the thread on the wax. Now, to fold this hair, I'm going to put my fingers on either side of the thread, on my side, and just kind of get that back on the hook, and just kind of fold it over. And then as it comes around, grab it like that. Once you get it started, it works fairly well. It kind of holds itself in place. I'll work my way towards the eye of the hook and get kind of right up behind the eye of the hook, and then slide this back. Pull that back. Contain all of it. Build a head. And then finish off the head of the fly. Trim that. And then I'm going to take and just pull all of that extra hair's mask off of there. And then you can see there's not a whole lot left. But the head of the fly is covered up, and it's a super buggy looking fly. Just treat this with some good liquid floating. I like to use the Loon Loxa. It's just a personal preference. Treat it really good before you fish it. If you want to fish it under the surface, you can put a little split shot out in front of it, or just don't treat it and squeeze it wet before you put it in the water, and it'll fish just a few inches under the surface. So this is an extremely versatile fly. This is my color that I've had a lot of luck on just across the country, with that burnt orange and green, bright green underbody. So give that a try. Fish it through any caddis hatches that you see, especially if they're not taking the surface flies, the adults. I think it'll do good for you.